We strongly encourage other nations whose economies depend on the Strait far more than ours. We get less than 1% of our oil from the Strait. Some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%. China gets 90%. Many of the Europeans get quite a bit. So we want them to come and help us with the Strait. We have it in very good shape. The countries, I said, we've already taken care of Iran, but now, because of the fact that literally a single terrorist can put something in the water or shoot something or shoot a missile, and it's fairly close range because it is a tight area, Iran has always used that as an economic weapon.
That's Donald Trump earlier in the day tried to justify, I guess, the call out to some allies to help clear the Strait of Hormuz. He mentioned, of course, some of the Asian countries that get a far more oil than the U.S. does, which kind of makes you wonder perhaps why the need for this then. But let's try to find out more. David Fraser is a retired Major General here in Canada and on the line. Major General, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciate it.
Aaron, good to be with you.
Let me ask, if I can, first, with respect to this comment, I think there are a lot of people, maybe you're one of them, trying to understand what exactly is the play here for Donald Trump. What is he looking for in calling on allies to be able to help here? Why?
Well, I think right now that he started this operation without any consultation, and he thought it was going to be ending in probably a few hours or a few days, much like Venezuela. But he's now actually found out it's a lot more complicated than he thought, and he's in trouble. Politically, he's in trouble. Militarily, he's doing a great job, but politically, economically, this is taking a lot more effort, and he needs other people to come in there and help him. And notwithstanding, he says that 90% of China gets their oil through this Strait of Hormuz. They don't. They only get about 40%. Still a big number, but he needs other people to justify what he's doing.
And so far what we've seen is some of those people, some of those countries are simply saying, you know what, this isn't our war, it's not NATO's war, and they're kind of pulling back, suggesting they won't be helping. What does that change?
Well, again, what we've seen is the military operation is now turning into a diplomatic operation. And, and the good news is it's turning into a diplomatic operation because countries are going to tell Trump and the administration, go talk to Iran and end this war so we can get the economic flow going through the Strait of Hormuz. And, if you do that, we'll probably continue to talk to you about what we can do to support you. But until then, no thanks. And, fundamentally, this is not a NATO problem. It's a problem for nations that have got interest in the region, but it's not NATO. And he's trying to sort of, expand the argument against NATO, which isn't true because NATO was there to support the United States at 9/11.
Look, strategically, if I could, and I appreciate your insight on something like this, I heard a couple of people talking about the fact that, by virtue of Iran attacking some of those other countries in the Gulf, so Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi, Kuwait, Dubai, etc., most of whom, if not all of whom, have American bases or installations of some kind. This is designed to basically get those countries to put pressure on the U.S. to say, look, we're not directly involved. We don't want to be directly involved. Not happy about having, of course, drones or bombs or missiles land there. Is that the play here that you see playing out in the long run, where all these other Gulf states come together and say, okay, enough is enough, and it's time for you to stop this?
I think that's part of it. I think, Iran's being very strategic in trying to engage the American interests around the region to put pressure on those governments to put pressure on the United States. But Iran has gone and talked so many civilian states, too, that, their argument is really weakened. And it's just now everybody's really upset in the region against Iran. And again, that goes back to United States, that you started this war and there was no real justification to start a war with a country like Iran, notwithstanding that they are, the world's leaders in exporting terrorism around the world for 47 years. But did we need to go to war, or were there other means to deal with Iran? And I think that's the diplomatic questions that are going on right now.
Well, let me ask the question then, as you just brought up. Were there other means? Because we're hearing two different stories. We actually had the Iranian foreign minister on national TV in the U.S. yesterday saying negotiations have never even started, despite what Donald Trump suggested, that, they were going well and then they weren't going well, and that's why we did this. Who are we supposed to believe here?
Well, first of all, I would not believe the foreign minister for Iran, but at the same time, internationally and through the UN, we did have an agreement where there was a nuclear agreement where we could get nuclear inspectors into Iran to see what was going on. Not perfect, but better than what we have now, which is we have no access whatsoever. There were negotiations going on. The Minister of Oman was actually talking with all the parties, and, those negotiations never really got off the ground. Intelligence from Israel and U.S. said we can get rid of the regime after Venezuela. They thought they could do it quickly, and look at the mess we're in right now.
Yeah.
So there were other means to be done that not we, but the United States chose to ignore, and here we are.
Was it short-sighted to think you could effect regime change by just going ahead and bombing all their military installations and then think that would be enough for this regime to fall?
Yes. We have been talking in the West for decades about how we could get the population of Iran, which is being oppressed by this regime, to rise up against the Ayatollahs and the Council of Experts and things like that. And I think it was just really naive to think by just taking out the Ayatollah and a few layers of leadership that would be all that would be necessary to get the people. This is a very complicated society, very embedded religious hierarchy that as the regime has shown, it is very capable of surviving for the midterm. So I think there was a gross overestimation based on recent experience in the United States, emboldened by the Prime Minister of Israel to finish off business that has been bugging them for years.
What do you think with respect to the history of regime change in general, right? Typically, at least from what I'm reading, this never works out very well, does it?
No, and I've experienced a couple of it. Look how regime change worked in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya. None of it has worked. And I thought, the West would have learned our lesson after a few decades of doing this and bumbling around and making a mess of it. And here we are yet again in Iran, which is a really, really big nation. And we're stuck in a war that is actually affecting you and I at the gas pumps.
The other thing that's now come up, and I asked this question of our audience today, with respect to Canada's potential involvement. And I bring this up because, of course, as I said, Donald Trump did reach out today to some allies, Japan, Germany, France, etc., to try to get some support here. And my question was, should Canada, and I know there's been a survey on this, there's an Ipsos poll out asking what Canadians think of whether Canada should get involved. If asked by the U.S. here, what's your thought on that?
Well, Canada doesn't have much interest in the area. There's no NATO requirement for us to do anything over there. If we did anything over there, it would be purely in a defensive mode if we were asked. We've not. And, the bigger issue is who's calling the shots? This is not a coalition of the willing. This is Donald Trump deciding, and listening to Donald Trump with his conversation with the UK Prime Minister when the Prime Minister said he's got to talk to his team. That's called democracy. And Trump said, you don't have to talk to your team. So again, for Canada to go into any operation with a president that, views democracy like that, I don't think there's any interest for Canada to participate. And what we could participate would be very limited anyway.
Some of the people we talked to expressing opinions suggested not only should Canada participate, we shouldn't wait to be asked, we should volunteer. What do you make of that?
Again, we don't run to the sound of the guns because the situation over there is not under control. The United States was the most capable military in the world, and they've got all the capability. They are still dealing with a country that has a punch and a bite, and the country that has lost most of its capability still has a strategic effect just by saying that they can close the Strait of Hormuz to those who they don't like, and they still can send a drone, hundreds if not thousands of kilometers away to destroy something. So this is not something for Canada to get involved in. We are a small nation. We work within coalitions, and we do not do things unilaterally, especially in a situation as complicated as this.
Final question I'll ask you, if you were a betting man, how do you think this ultimately ends?
I think it ultimately ends where there's enough international pressure with the president that he has to find a solution with whoever he can talk to in Iran to pull out, because the longer he stays there, the more it affects the economy. He's got midterms coming up, and it's going to make trade with all these countries around the world even more difficult, including his biggest trading adversary, which is China, which he's got a trip potentially scheduled in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, to your point, I'm just seeing now there's a headline or a bulletin here suggesting he's going to put off that trip, asking China to reschedule their summit because of what's going on right now in Iran. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Major General, very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the insight.
Aaron, thank you very much.
You bet. David Fraser, retired Major General here in Canada.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.